All right. We are all live. How is everyone doing today? I am here with Gonzalo Lira, and we are waiting for Alexander. He just sent me a message and said he's going to be around 5 minutes late, but Alexander said, please start without me, and he is going to jump on to join us soon. So, Gonzalo, you are in a public place, from what I gather from listening to the background. You put out
I'm in a supermarket.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, got it. I thought so. You put out a
sorry
video
about
this
that.
morning.
Hey, chat, how's it going?
Yeah,
Alex, it's always a pleasure to be on.
Great. Let me just say a quick hello. I was gonna say Alexander Gonzalo. Let me say a quick hello to everybody joining us on Odyssey.
Oh man, what happened? It really.
Yeah. What's that? Everyone joining us on Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube and locals. Thank you to our moderators. Real quick before Alexander joins us, Gonzalo, what is going on? Because I saw your video in the morning where you said the internet was out. What's the story?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me properly. I'll just speak and assume that you guys can hear me. And Alex, be on the private chat and just tell me if you don't hear me or if you need me to repeat anything.
You're all good. You're all good.
Yeah, yesterday there was like some massive explosions here in Kharkov. I mean, they were loud enough that the car alarms went off. And it's been yesterday was kind of hairy. I'm close to the city center, okay, and so yesterday something happened that I don't know if it was outgoing or incoming, but there was all kinds of explosions, and the internet is gone for half the city because a company called Triolan, which is the internet service provider and cable provider, they went on the fritz. They got hit by it's not clear if it was a missile or artillery strike, and it's unclear as to what it was specifically that got hit. And so, something in their system got hit. By the way, I'm just talking and I have no idea if you guys can hear me. I'm Alex hearing you at all, but I'm just going to keep on talking as if you guys can hear me.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. And so what I did was I hopped on my motorcycle and went around to a bunch of different places here in the city, looking for the best public Wi-Fi. And this is it.
So are you with us, Gonzalo? Gonzalo, are you there? No. We lost him. We lost him. Let me see if he sent a message. One second, chat. 1 second. Nope. Nah, he's not with us. On private message. Let me check here. Nope. Oh, there he is. All right. He's back. You're back. We can hear you. I can hear the background noise, Gonzalo. Can you hear us, Gonzalo? Can you access private chat?
Better or worse? Do you guys hear me?
Now we hear you. Now we hear you. Now we hear you. You're all good. You're all good. Can you? Yes, we hear you. We hear you. Yes, we hear the background noise at least. So we hear the supermarket like checkout, like they're ringing stuff up. You can hear the. Can you hear us, Gonzalo? Can you send me a message in the private chat if you hear us? No, I think we're going to lose him again. McDonald's Wi-Fi. It sounds like he said he's in a supermarket, and it sounds like he's somewhere where they're ringing stuff up. He's online, but no sound. Here he is again. Let's see. We got Gonzalo number 2 now.
Do you hear me now?
This one guy. Yes. Let me remove this one guy. All right. Yes, we hear you. We get you for a second, and then you cut out.
And then I
can hear the background noise. No, I can hear the background. You're good. You're good. You're good. Just talk. You're good.
Yeah. Well,
what's the story?
I'll tell you real quick. I'll tell you real quick what's going on. What's going on is that yesterday there was a big. I don't know if it was an offensive. What it was, I have no idea. But what happened was that there was all of a sudden a lot of shelling going on, and it destroyed Triolan, an installation belonging to Triolan, which is a big internet service provider. I don't know exactly what was hit, but it knocked out the internet and cable TV for half the city or more. And it was loud enough. I said this before, but if I'm repeating myself, sorry.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I was a bit held up with family matters, let's say.
Gonzalo, are you there?
Gonzalo?
No, we lost him again. Here he is again.
And here he is, I think.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Okay.
Can you hear me or not at all?
We heard you where you were talking about triage, I think you said, internet, or?
Yeah, Triolan got hit. I don't know what specifically. Triolan. Trio, Triolan. And it got hit, but I don't know what specifically got hit. And, the shelling, the banging last night was loud enough that cars' alarms were going off all over the city. And it was quite remarkable, Something clearly has happened on the Kharkov front because the I don't know if it was outgoing or incoming, but whatever it was very, very loud. And it was vaguely to the east and to the north. Beyond that, I could not tell you. I mean, I can't even tell you if it was outgoing or incoming artillery fire. But it was a lot of it yesterday. The reports are that 9 people were killed. But it's kind of like sketchy because you don't know who. And there's always, a baby died. I don't know if a baby died or not, because these stories come up. And so anyway, and here I am. I had to ride around the city in my motorcycle to find the best internet. And this is it. So I measured it on one of those speed test apps. And so this is the absolute best I can do. I'm sorry for the bad quality. But yeah, I just wanted to, hop on quick. I'm not going to be able to stay that long, obviously, because, the internet is just not good enough to have a serious and relaxed conversation. But things are really changing. And I've been following the news from the front in Donbass, and it's very clear that the front is collapsing. Every day you're seeing the Russians advance a little bit more, a couple of 100 square meters here, a couple of 100 square meters over there. They keep on chewing away and eating up terrain. And so it's collapsing in the east. Yeah. The other rumor that I've been hearing a lot of is that more and more people are surrendering or deserting. That's becoming an issue. And so and the casualties, they're losing almost a battalion a day, and this is catastrophic. But sorry. And So that's the report I just want to tell you, and it's just it's a remarkable situation, you know.
Yeah.
And what's most shocking to me is that when I get on the internet and I start reading up on different outside media talking about the situation here, they're just talking out of their butts. I mean, they're completely in la la land, you know, and they keep talking about game changers. This is a game changer. That's a game changer. And as I understand it now, the latest game changer is, I mean, it was before it was the.
We lost
Now
him.
it's some radar system is going to be the game changer, and as I understand it, Boris Johnson wants to send missiles. I think it's all insane, to tell you the truth, but they don't seem to know what the hell they're doing in the West, and they certainly don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Well, can I just say, Gonzalo, that you've actually provided us here in Britain with some actually useful frontline information. Because you remember that great counteroffensive that Ukraine carried out northeast of Kharkov? It was all supposed to have meant that Kharkov was out of artillery range. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. No, I mean, okay, like I said before, I don't know if it was outgoing or incoming, but whatever, either way, it was, like I said, where I was, the car alarms were going off. That's how loud it was. And remember, those car alarms go off by vibration, not necessarily noise. And so, yeah, it was. I mean, I know that they go off by vibration because sometimes when I ride my motorcycle near them, they go off, right?
If the shelling was outgo,
it's really unbelievable. But what I've been shocked of, you know, following the maps and whatnot is how, you know, there's only one direction every day. Every day they are eating up terrain. They're eating up more and more terrain.
Yeah. But the point I was going to make, Gonzalo, is if the shelling was outgoing, in other words, if what you were hearing was Ukrainian shelling Russians, then that must mean that the Russians, by definition, are within artillery range of Kharkov. So it doesn't really matter, it seems to me, whether it's incoming or outgoing. It just proves that the Russians are still within artillery range of Kharkov, one way or the other. In fact, we've lost him.
We lost him. Yeah,
we lost
Maybe
him.
He'll come back.
Maybe
there was noise in the background, everybody, because he had to go to a supermarket, from what I understand, to get internet. That's why there was noise. That's why it sounded like people were getting stuff checked out through the supermarket. But let's see if he comes back.
Yes.
Alexander.
Well, I mean, can I just
in what I must say, Alexander, how are you doing in the land of Boris Johnson, crazy town?
It is becoming crazier almost by the day here. I mean, as I said, the economic situation is very bad. The government has just given us all £400 sterling to cover us for our energy costs. Now, given the speed at which these energy costs are rising, I mean, that will it'll make a difference, but of course it won't make a huge difference. But of course, the government is running a big budget deficit. It spent vast sums of money during the pandemic crisis. I mean, our financial situation, the budgetary situation of the government is very, very bad. And, you know, I do wonder how on earth this is really going to make a difference in terms of people's overall financial situations. I mean, £400 isn't going to make a dramatic difference over a year. And on top of that, of course, we're going to have sooner or later, increasingly, we're having mortgage interest rates rising. We're seeing a catastrophic decline in the economy. And of course, what's happening instead, as we've discussed on our own programs, is that Boris Johnson is still talking about Ukraine. He now wants to send missiles to Ukraine, or at least multiple rockets to Ukraine.
MLRS
to Ukraine. He's wading in on this. Why he thinks that's going to change the situation in Ukraine, I don't know. But anyway, he does. And I suspect more and more people in Britain are going to start asking themselves, is our Prime Minister interested in us, or is he interested in Ukraine? Is he the Prime Minister of Britain, or is he the Prime Minister of Ukraine? Because the way he's going on and on and on about Ukraine, I get the impression he's more focused on that. But, he's no better or worse than most of our political class. I think this is the other thing to say. I mean, at the moment, we've discussed this on our programs, and none of them are talking much cogent sense. But anyway, you're gone.
I think Boris is taking the crown for the worst. I'm sorry. I mean, is this true? I had to double and triple check this, and I think this is true. During the interview he gave with Bloomberg, he actually suggested that Zelensky create an alliance against Russia as an alternative to the European Union, and it will include the Baltic countries. I'm sorry, Boris has just leapfrogged over Biden, over Schultz, Kamala Harris, over Ursula von der Crazy. Boris has leapfrogged them all to become the craziest of all of these guys.
That is exactly what he said. I mean, it'll be Britain, the Baltic states, a couple of other places, importantly, excluding Germany and France and Italy, because these are unreliable. And of course, it'll all be outside NATO. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. I mean, it's getting wilder and weirder almost by the day. But the reason it is because, of course, everything is going wrong. So the economic situation in Britain is going badly wrong. There's a political crisis because, of course, he's got Partygate. I mean, ludicrous though that is, but it's nonetheless undermining him, and it's not gone down well with many people here in Britain. And of course, and this is where we come back to the things that Gonzalo was telling us, the military situation in Ukraine is getting darker. And the British media, even the British Ministry of Defence, is now admitting this. Even Boris himself, actually, in a kind of a way, admitted this. And I'm sure that you know that last night the Russians stormed a not insignificant town, Liman, with a population of 20,000. And I think the most interesting thing about that was that the Ukrainians, as far as I could see, the Ukrainian troops that had been stationed there basically gave up very fast. Yep. They ran away, just as they did, a day before in a place called Svetlodarsk. I mean, up to now, the Ukrainians have fought very bravely and they've resisted. But increasingly, it's looking as if more and more Ukrainian troops are saying to themselves, what am I fighting for? For whom and for what? And why should I go on fighting and get killed in what is a frankly losing battle? So, this is, I mean, it's not yet, it seems to me, a collapse. I mean, we're not at that point yet, but it's the first indicators that a collapse is coming. And I was looking this morning at some maps, and you see these sort of Russian forces are now closing in on Slavyansk. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk is where the main concentration of the Ukrainian army. Well, we say that. We don't
that's
actually,
the big one. Slavyansk. If Slavyansk falls, I think
absolutely.
it's over.
Exactly. I agree.
It's over in Donbass.
Well, the headquarters of the Ukrainian forces in Donbass are in the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk region. Yeah. So I mean, if that collapses, Donbass ends. And frankly, we must always remember this is the best army Ukraine has. And the odd thing is, and this is where I did a program about this a few 2 days ago, because instead of doing what some people have been talking about and afraid that Ukraine might do, or hoping Ukraine might do, which is hold back its reserves, build up its army, re-equip with Western weapons, what they do is they've been feeding troops all the time into Donbass. And of course, they just go into Donbass and they get destroyed. I mean, the military logic of it, I mean, I'm not a military person, but I simply don't understand it. And I've been reading increasing numbers of commentators who are saying the same thing. They're saying, these stand and fight orders that the Ukrainian army has been getting make no military sense, make no logical sense. They're just causing more and more people to die. And we see that the Ukrainian troops on the front lines are now starting to rebel against them, in effect. They're not prepared to go and die and, fight and die defending undefendable positions. I mean, I have to say I agree with them. I think they're making the correct choices. But as I said, it was interesting because the Russians appear to have thought that, it would take them about a week to capture Liman. And it just took them a day or so. I mean, the Ukrainian troops just left. Now we'll see whether they make more of a fight in Slavyansk and Kramatorsk and what happens there. And we'll see what happens in the other place where they're now essentially surrounded, which is Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. But it increasingly looking as if resistance there is crumbling too. And by the way, the other thing I wanted to say is that this is real war. This is real fighting now. I mean, what we saw in Kiev back in March, there were skirmishes, there was a certain amount of shelling, but it was on a fairly light scale. What's going on in Donbass is on an entirely different scale. It is real, grinding, brutal war fought in the most ruthless way.
Yeah. So it looks like Gonzalo's not going to be able to make it back. He has the link to join us, and if he's hearing, if he's listening, and if he's still at that place or at that supermarket, or he finds other internet, let's hope he gets back. But thank you, Gonzalo, for letting us know what's going on in Kharkiv, and stay well. And Alexander, a couple of questions I want to throw your way, and then let's get to the questions that people have on the chats, on Odyssey, on Rumble, YouTube, and our awesome locals community. But first off, the fact that I think the Ukraine troops are starting to realize that Zelensky is not there to keep them safe and to look after their well-being as they're fighting this war. I think they're starting to realize that, and I think they're starting to realize that the strategy is not so much to really fight the Russians as it is to follow Lloyd Austin's objective, which is to delay, to create a prolonged insurgency, as Jake Sullivan said, and to just kind of throw as many Ukrainians at the Russians and hope that they can resist for another month or 2 or 3 until something happens or some sort of, as they say, game-changing event, as they always throw that word out there, another game changer. Something can result in their regime change in Russia. It's not going to happen. And I even think that the Lloyd Austins of this world are starting to realize that. I do have to say this about Boris Johnson. When I listen to what he said, I laugh at first because the guy's so silly, and he absolutely has become clownish in every respects of that word. But he's also very sinister. This man is he's not a good guy. I was going to say something else, but he's not a good guy, and I'll explain myself, and I want you to sound off on it. And I've got another question as well. He was the one that went to Kiev, and he lobbied and convinced Zelensky to not find a peace agreement with Russia. That was Boris Johnson. He is to blame for all the lives lost. Then it is Boris Johnson now who is coming up with this crazy idea to create an alliance so that Ukraine can last another month or 2 or 3. That is his goal. He is consistently, every time it looks like we might get some sort of end to this conflict, Boris Johnson comes along and he has another crazy idea or something planned so that he can delay this another month or 2 or 3. And now he's dangling this EU offshoot to Zelensky. This guy is absolutely manipulative, sinister, and stupid all
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is dangerous. It's one thing to be smart and intelligent and sinister, but to be stupid and sinister, well, this is just a bad combination. What do you think of what I've said? And my second real quick question is, what do you think Zelensky does now that things are collapsing? Gonzalo did a video and he said there might be a coup d'etat, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah.
I think maybe Zelensky might say, you know what, I've got 800 billion lying around in banks and I need to, I just might as well cut out and get that money along with my production crew, which is my cabinet. It's time for us to bolt, and we'll set up a government in exile in London. What do you think Zelensky's options are now?
Well, I think let's talk about Zelensky. I think that's entirely plausible. I also have to say I think the possibility of a coup is a real one.
800 million, sorry. Sorry, I said 800
million, not billion. Sorry. Yeah, quite true. But anyway, just to say, I think that both possibilities are real. And by the way, they're not necessarily entirely mutually inconsistent in the sense that, you know, there might be a coup, and then he might bolt and take his 800 million, go to London or Florida or wherever it is, and, you know, live the high life there. And when it all collapses in Ukraine, he could say, well, I was overthrown illegally, and, you know, I'm still the president of Ukraine, and form his his government in exile there, which no doubt the British and the Americans and a couple of others would recognize. But, you know, these are not inconsistent possibilities. I have to say the talk of a coup is now growing. I mean, I'm seeing lots of people talking about this because, of course, people in Ukraine are getting more and more distressed and more angry because they've been sent into battle. You see this word cannon fodder being used increasingly. I'm not, you know, this isn't coming from me. I'm seeing this now in Ukrainian sites and Ukrainian comments and statements from Ukrainian military units that they're being treated as cannon fodder. And of course, the families of these people must be feeling very angry, and they're feeling increasingly betrayed. And bear something in as well. You know, we hear about game changers all the time. We hear about Ukrainian counteroffensives. Of course, the more they talk about that, and the more it doesn't happen, the more credibility collapses, and the more people feel that they've been used. And that may very, very well create a massive reaction. Now, Zelensky has to be careful because, of course, in a violent situation, I don't want to say more than I want to say or should say, because I don't want to be accused of, you know, encouraging anything. But in a violent situation, he's got to be careful that some of this violence doesn't get directed at him. That's all I'm going to say about that. So if there's a coup, he better have things planned to get out fast. And if there's a collapse in Donbass over the next few weeks, if the Russians start moving further west, if Zaporozhye, as I suspect, is the next target, then I think at that point he really needs to think very hard about his personal options, as well as Ukraine's. Now, let's get to Boris Johnson, because in my opinion, Boris Johnson, I think you've summarized him brilliantly. I think whether or not he was a sinister man at the beginning, what he is doing is sinister and it is manipulative. Now, back in March in Istanbul, we had what was looking like the start of a negotiation. And Boris Johnson came along and he wrecked it. He said, you can't agree to this. If you go ahead and make these kind of concessions to the Russians, Britain is not going to provide you with the security guarantees that you're asking for, which the Ukrainians needed as a face saver when they were accepting that they wouldn't be part of NATO. So he would say, you won't get those. And on the contrary, if you continue fighting, you're going to get all the military support, all the military aid, all the economic aid that you need. And Ukraine has been taken up the garden path ever since before the Maidan events all the way back to the association agreement and all that, the association agreement that was being negotiated with the EU, which caused that political crisis in 2013, which led to the Maidan events of 2014, which led to the war. So there's a long story of Ukraine being fed promises which aren't realized. And at a critical moment, when it was already clear that Ukraine was in existential danger, Boris Johnson comes along and he feeds them more promises and he mixes them up with threats. And he's put Ukraine now in a catastrophic position where, as I said, it's losing people. Now, Gonzalo said the equivalent of a battalion a day. That's true if you believe the Russian figures. But even Zelensky admits they're losing people at the rate of 100 a day. Now, I think that everybody accepts that whatever figure Zelensky gives, you must multiply. So it's certainly more than 100 a day. They are losing catastrophically in Donbass. Their troops are melting away. The cities are falling. Their military is collapsing. And now they're in an absolute critical situation. So what do? Do they come round and say to their people, we've got to negotiate? All those promises we were given by the West haven't amounted to anything. People in Ukraine, if Ukraine gives up now, if Zelensky goes back and negotiates now, all those people whose sons and fathers and husbands and brothers have died fighting in Donbass are going to ask, why didn't we do this in March? Why didn't we do this previously? But why specifically didn't we do this in March? And they're going to blame Zelensky, obviously. But some of them are also going to blame Boris Johnson and the British and the West. And that's the situation that Boris Johnson played a critical role in maneuvering Ukraine into. Now, what was he thinking of? What did he think he was doing? I have to say this, and this is where I think, the sinister and the callous where Boris Johnson is involved comes in. I think he's used this crisis in Ukraine to maintain himself as Prime Minister in Britain. I think he thought that he could prolong the war in Ukraine. I think he thought that he could achieve some kind of defeat of the Russians. I think he went along with the whole neocon project because he thought it would succeed. He thought he could play Churchill. He made some extraordinary speeches. He said that what Russia is doing in Ukraine must not only fail, but must be seen to fail. He talked in that kind of a way. So one of the reasons he's prolonging the war, one of the reasons he's coming up with all these crazy projects of new alliances is because, of course, now he feels that his own political career, what's left of it, his own reputation, what's left of it, they're all invested in this war. And that's why he's becoming so obsessive about it, almost to the exclusion of everything else, even as the economy collapses around him. I have to say, I think sinister is right. I think manipulative is right. I think stupid is right. But I have to say something else. It's such a complete waste because, of course, Boris Johnson won the Brexit war. At the end of 2019, he was in a stronger position than any British Prime Minister has been since the first 2 years of Tony Blair. He could have done a huge amount of things which would have been, positive, creative, building on his Brexit victory, building on his Conservative majority, charting a course forward for Britain, and also a forward for peace in Europe. Churchill would have sought peace in Europe. Make no mistake about it. So would Thatcher. If you know about these people properly. Instead, he's thrown it all away. He's left Britain in a disastrous position. He's left Europe in crisis. And of course, he's destroyed Ukraine. I mean, he's turned out to be the most destructive prime minister that I can remember. And that's saying an awful lot.
Yeah. Gonzalo sent me a message here. He says that the Wi-Fi is just cutting out, but
Yeah.
he said he's fine, and we'll put together a stream. Hopefully he's fine, and we'll try to put together a stream if internet comes up for him maybe next week. But we'll see. He said he's all right, and everything is good on his end. So is there any way, and we'll get to questions right after this this comment, is there any way for Zelensky or a different government to still find peace?
Yes, there is.
I mean, could you go to the Russians and say, you know what, let's do a Ukrainian federation?
Yeah.
Let's do a Ukrainian federation. Let's go on the ruble, the entire federation.
Yeah.
EU, no chance. NATO, no chance. 6-7 different states, and we'll leave it there. Or, we'll accept the losses that we have, and let's find peace. Or, whatever's left of Ukraine, Russia, and if Poland were to come to their senses and calm down from the hysteria, Poland, Hungary can all sit at a table, not the European Union. EU, butt out. Biden, neocons, butt out. UK, butt out. Ukraine, Russia, Hungary, perhaps Romania, Poland, all sit down and figure this out. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Your
train of thought. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
You're talking in a completely rational way. And of course they could do that. I have to say it'd be much more difficult. I mean, the Russians are very, very angry about what happened in Istanbul. I mean, they were already very angry about what happened with the Minsk agreements. But Istanbul has really enraged them. And I want to make a point about Istanbul, because we've talked many times about the Russian advance on Kiev, and about the way in which the Russians went to Kiev to pin Ukrainian troops down in order to enable them to focus on Donbass and perhaps on Kherson region and all of that. And we've also said, and it remains my view, by the way, that the Russians pulled back from Kiev because they thought that mission was accomplished. But that's my inference. What the Russians have actually said is that they pulled back from Kiev because the Ukrainians seem to be sitting down in Istanbul and coming back with realistic proposals. So the Russians say they feel cheated after Istanbul, and no doubt they do feel cheated after Istanbul. If you read statements by Russian officials going all the way up to Lavrov and beyond, Putin sometimes, they don't give much impression of believing that Ukraine will ever negotiate sincerely. So it's going to be very difficult indeed to actually get a real negotiation started again between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And of course, any negotiation now, well, the ground has shifted so much that I anticipate the Russians will be in an utterly uncompromising mood. I mean, they've said obviously no to NATO. They've obviously said no to the EU. I doubt they'll be happy or will accept security guarantees by other powers for Ukraine. I think they will insist on even more territorial, much more extensive territorial concessions from Ukraine than they would have been willing to accept in Istanbul. It will be difficult to get a negotiation started. But if you want to save Ukraine, that's what you must do. And if you want to save Ukrainian lives, that's also what you must do. You must sit down, talk, and negotiate sincerely, taking a realistic understanding of your position. And yes, maybe you can ask all the neighboring states, Romania, Moldova, Poland, Belarus, also to participate.
Slovakia, Turkey. I'm seeing the chat. Yeah,
absolutely. Get them all to sit down together, come up with some kind of, long-term solution. Push the EU out, push the Americans out, certainly push the British out. Maybe you can do that, but you've got to act fast, and you've got to accept that you're going to do it now. Kissinger, in that speech he made at Davos, said that the window is only 2 months. I think that's massively optimistic, by the way. Now, can Ukraine do that? Well, obviously, it can't happen whilst Zelensky's leader of Ukraine. I mean, I think the Russians have lost all trust in Zelensky now. So you have to find some way of changing the government in Ukraine. You have to find some way of persuading Zelensky either to resign or to go or whatever it is, and, coups, whatever. And then you have to sit down and you have to put together a constructive leadership. I will say that the Russians have shown some respect for the military leadership of Ukraine, the Ukrainian military high command. I'm talking now about the regular army, not obviously these nationalist battalions. But, they might be willing to talk with people from there, for example. But time for this is short. And I don't know to what extent politically that is possible for Ukraine to do. The risk is that, of course, if the war is prolonged, we will see Ukraine losing more material, more people, more territory, day by day, not first inch by inch, then mile by mile, then league by league, because the longer the collapse, the faster it gets, in a way, because the more they retreat, the more the Ukrainian army crumbles, and then of course we get to a situation where it's no longer a case of Ukraine negotiating; it's of Ukraine dictating terms. So that's where we will. That's where Russia dictating terms, and that's what we need to understand. And I'm afraid we got to put aside all the wonder weapons from the West, the fantasies of counteroffensives. I'm going to say something. I mean, this is Arestovich. I'm sure many people on our chat know about Arestovich. I mean, he's in a few weeks going through all the various stages that the German information machine went through during the Second World War. I mean, heroic soldiers, people, fighting with, Molotov cocktails. Now it's the wonder weapons, the Western wonder weapons and the counteroffensives. I mean, we've got to put all that nonsense to one side, focus on the realities, sit down, negotiate while we've still got some cards left to play, and put their people that the Russians can have some confidence in and respect, or alternatively, as I said, wait a further month, 2 months, 3 months. I'm not saying how long it will be, but then get into a situation where the Kremlin dictates terms. And you're absolutely right. This illusion, this fantasy that the West had, that they would be able to use this crisis to engineer regime change in Moscow, manifestly not happening. Russian economy hasn't collapsed. Russian financial system hasn't imploded. The ruble hasn't gone into free fall. Putin is staying where he is. He looks stronger than ever.
Yeah, and I have to say, you always got to look at actions and not words. It's kind of like a mantra that I try to live by.
Yeah.
And even I've had my doubts about Putin's administration. I don't want to say Putin. I want to say his Security Council team, his administration. I've always thought to myself, do they not see all of these weapons coming in? Are they not worried about these MLRS systems? Are they not worried about this economic shock and awe that's been launched at them? And I have to admit, when you look at the results of everything that's happened and the actions that have taken place, you begin to realize that the people that are not so qualified and so smart are sitting on the West side of things, the EU side of things, because you look at what they've done and the results of their actions, which has been catastrophic. But you look at just the economic side of things, of what's going on in Russia, and I have to say, these are very, very smart, capable people. I never would have expected the foreign currency reserve outcome, if it is to be believed. 300 billion. No, the Russians only had 23 billion in Europe, if you believe the statements coming out of Reuters and the EU.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, ruble, maybe it'll be at 100 after this economic war of attrition if they're lucky, maybe 90. Now they have a problem that it's too strong.
Yeah.
The ruble's too damn strong, and that's going to hurt exports. He's raising pensions. Tell me a country in Europe that is giving a 10% raise to pensioners. Name me one. Name me one freaking country in the EU that's doing that. Not freaking one. And I just carry over the results of how they handled the economic war, which is, you said it, the economic war that was launched on Russia has never been launched on any other country, maybe Iran, but it's never been launched on a G20 power ever, this type of economic war. And I just say to myself, everything that Russia has prepared for and the actions they've taken to fight off this economic war, they're going to use the same smarts to accomplish their goals in Ukraine. And, for all of our trying to analyze things and trying to make out what's happening, sometimes I have to step back and I have to say to myself, Putin and his team and Shoigu and Lavrov, they know 100 times more things than I know. And they're 100 times smarter than I am. And I'm sure they understand what's going on and they've prepared for this. And they have certain goals that they want to meet, and they're going to meet those goals.
Yes.
I'm starting to see a Putin administration, his whole team, even Medvedev, who I've also been cynical about in the past. I thought he was some Atlanticist guy. I'm seeing that this is a really capable team that he has there. So the collective West and Zelensky and Boris Johnson need to just realize that they've lost this. They've lost this, negotiate, and move on.
I entirely agree with that. I mean, I would say, as I said, in terms of the Russian economy, as we were saying in a program that we did yesterday, nobody can ever say that I've ever sort of badmouthed Russia's economy. I've always thought that people underestimated it massively. Even I have been surprised by the sheer speed of the turnaround. And, I did not anticipate this. I mean, I expected a much higher inflation rate, much more severe contraction, many more problems that we're actually seeing. I thought that they'd be able to handle it, but I never thought that they'd be able to turn it around as fast and as effectively as they have. That's the first thing. Now, on the military side of things, I think we're also seeing things that are turning out very much in the way that they are. And I'm going to say something else. I've been reading more and more about the $40 billion US military package for Ukraine. And I've now actually, started to unpick it. And I'm going to make a comment about this. And I think that this is perhaps tells us a great deal about the real actual thinking by the military people within the Pentagon. Because remember, what's put in front of Biden is what the bureaucracy gets its instructions from the White House, but it's the bureaucracy that works it out. And it's the Pentagon that deals with the military side of things. So within that $40 billion package, there's just $6 billion of arms and training. Remember the training part for Ukraine. There's around $9 to $10 billion to replenish US arsenals for the weapons that have already been sent to Ukraine. Now, just do the maths. That means that the US has already sent $9 to $10 billion of arms to Ukraine, but they're going to supply less than $6 billion of arms to Ukraine from now on. US military support for Ukraine is falling. The $40 billion may sound big, but if you actually drill into the figures, Ukraine is getting less in weapons than it was getting before. So that's That's the actual reality. And that tells you, as I said, what the Pentagon people really think. They're not going to throw valuable American weaponry, valuable American know-how into what is increasingly looking like a debacle. They are quietly, the tough-minded people in the Pentagon. They're saying enough of this neocon adventure. We are actually scaling it down.
Yeah. Any other comments before we get to some questions?
Yeah, I did. There's just one particular one, and this is what the point I was trying to make to Gonzalo, and I want to just make it very briefly. This is just a rounding up of points, which is that when Ukraine launched, you remember that Kharkov counteroffensive in northeast Kharkov that was going to drive the Russians all the way to the Russian border and beyond. And I was reading about how Ukraine had won the battle for Kharkov and how Kharkov was no longer within artillery range. Well, what Gonzalo has told us, and he's an eyewitness, demonstrates conclusively that that is not true. Kharkov is still all once more within Russian artillery range. Now, I get completely Gonzalo's point that he doesn't know whether this shelling that he was hearing that was outgoing or incoming. But if you think about it, it doesn't make any difference, because if the Ukrainian artillery is firing at Russian troops and you can hear it from where he is in Kharkov, that means that the Russian troops are within artillery range of Kharkov, which by definition means that that Kharkov is within artillery range of the Russian troops. That Ukrainian offensive has clearly failed, and it's completely unraveled. And I noticed again that Gonzalo was saying that he was hearing these sounds. They seem to him to be coming from northeast Kharkov. That is precisely the area where this great offensive was supposed to have taken place. It has failed, and failed utterly. And of course, we haven't been told about it in the media either.
No, they're losing interest. The media is losing interest in this as well,
absolutely.
Alexander.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely. Well,
this is another thing that's working against the Zelensky regime, because we always got to remember, the Zelensky regime, their one strength is the media.
Yeah.
Is the narratives, the scripts, because at the end of the day, that's what his team does. That is their profession. These guys write scripts, they write scenarios, they act. That's their strength, and they're starting to see that their show is not so popular anymore, and they're worried about that.
Yeah, I would add, of course, it's also been a terrible trap, because keeping up the narrative of victory, of triumphal, heroic, and successful resistance, I am sure, is playing a major role in their decision making about the battlefields. So the fact that they're giving all these standard fight orders is precisely because they're worried that if Ukrainian troops are seen retreating, it contradicts this propaganda of success that they've been promoting. And of course, the people who are paying the price of that are those Ukrainian soldiers on the front line.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, let's get to some questions here. Let's see. Yeah. David S., thank you for that super sticker. Zuxi says, hi, Alex and Gonzalo. LLK says, not a single Ukraine news on BBC highlights page this morning. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it's just the point that you've been making just a moment ago, Alex. And it's I noticed the same, by the way, in The Guardian. I mean, I had to look hard yesterday before I could find Ukrainian news on it.
So real quick, Alexander, what does this tell you if I were to say to you, and I haven't been able to confirm this, so if there's anyone in Krakow or in Poland that can confirm this, please let me know. But this is something that I ran across. Once again, I haven't been able to confirm it. but I heard that Krakow, they announced on a radio program that I think they said June 1st, or I think they said June 1st, come June 1st, free transportation for Ukrainian refugees, like free trams and stuff like that, is going to stop.
Yes, I heard the
What
same
does
thing.
that tell you? I mean, to me, once again, it's another signal that even in a country like Poland, the Ukraine conflict is starting to, even for the people of Krakow or the people of Poland, is just starting to they want to move on. It seems. I don't know. That's what I'm reading.
No.
Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I see
No.
little things like that, and I say that's kind of interesting.
I think it is very interesting. I think it's a telltale sign that even in Poland, people are turning against this whole adventure. People are starting to sense it's failing. I mean, there was the universal expectation at the end of February and the beginning of March that the Russian economy was going to collapse and that there would be regime change. And then when that didn't happen, there was the hope that Russia would get bogged down into a prolonged war in Ukraine. And now that isn't happening either, you're trying to pull the curtain down on the whole affair. And that's it seems to me, obvious in terms of Western coverage of the war. But even in a place like Poland, people are now starting to just try to tiptoe away from it. That's what it looks like to me. I heard the same rumor, by the way, the same thing, and I wonder whether it's true. But where I read it, and I remember thinking that it looked like it probably was true, that Ukrainians have lost the right to a free public transport.
Yeah. Okay. From Possum Power, thank you for that awesome super chat. School dues paid. Thank you, Possum, for that. Any news on Kaliningrad?
No, I haven't heard anything there. But I think my own personal view is people are worried, excessively worried about Kaliningrad.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to do anything to Kaliningrad. I think that if they tried, it would be a debacle on a Homeric scale. And of course, as it's part of Russia, the Russians would be willing to use all available means, i.e. nuclear weapons, to defend it if they had to. So I don't think that there's going to be any kind of attack on Kaliningrad.
Poppy, thank you for that super chat. LLK says, every day the first thing I do is check all your channels. You are my sanity in this insanity, Alex. We will be traveling to Greece and Cyprus in August. Would be an honor to buy you a drink. Well, just find me. I will be around. I will be around Greece most likely, but maybe Cyprus. But let me know, and I may be traveling around Eastern Europe as well, Alexander. We'll see. We'll see where I end up. Toilet Sauce says, "Did you hear the newest coping from La La Land? Apparently, Ukraine needs to cede territory to Russia so as to not humiliate Putin.
Yeah.
Ukraine is winning so much, it needs to give up territory." Well said, Toilet Sauce.
Yeah,
I heard that.
Your Toilet Sauce, you got it exactly right. I mean, it's one of the most nonsensical things I've ever heard in my life. But, this is what comes when you've been peddling the propaganda of success. If you suddenly sit down and you have to make concessions, you have to come up with some kind of rationalization to explain them in a way which is consistent with the fairy tales you've been telling before. Of course, all you do that way is you make yourself look ridiculous and destroy your own credibility.
Yeah. The full Monty, thank you for that super chat. Dimitra says, hello, everyone. Hello, Alex, Alexander, and Gonzalo. I'm all ears. Thank you, Dimitra, for that. Diego, thank you for that super chat. Jungle Jin says, pronounce Albanese to rhyme with easy. Albanese. Okay. The
new Prime Minister of Australia, about whom I know very, very little indeed, to be honest. So anybody who can tell me anything about this person from Australia, I'd be very, very interested. The only thing I've heard, and it was from an Australian lawyer, is that this new government might be just fractionally more sympathetic to Julian Assange than the outgoing government was. But I don't know that that's true. and that might have been whistling in the wind.
It's going to need more than fractionally
Yeah, I
to help
agree,
him. Yeah.
yeah.
Illuminated Best Choice says, thank you for bringing clarity to all the nonsense that is taking place. Thank you for that super chat. M. Wick says, keep up the good work. Greetings from the center of green insanity, i.e. Germany. Green, yeah, well said. Green insanity. Misanthropic and out of coffee says, how important is the Samia Canal in Finland NATO bid?
This is an interesting issue because, of course, there have been all kinds of agreements between Russia and Finland over the long years of Finland's neutrality. And it's important to remember that the Russians, Soviet Union, Stalin, not an easy man, let off Finland reasonably lightly at the end of the Second World War on the assumption that Finland would always be neutral. And anyway, the point is all kinds of agreements were made, including about this canal, which is important for the Russians. And the Russians are now raising this issue. And they're saying, look, if you're going to join NATO, what happens to this canal? What's going to happen to all these other agreements? And again, one wonders whether anybody in Helsinki has thought about that. And one wonders also what the Russians are going to do if the Finns, as one must assume, simply ignore their concerns. So, there's going to be problems between Finland and Russia. I mean, between Russia and Sweden, I'd have thought fewer, because to be frank about it, they've never been very friendly anyway. But between Russia and Finland, it's going to be tricky.
Yeah. Sanjeva says, please take pity on us living in Australia and let us know when live shows are on a weekly basis, because most live shows are at 3 a.m. Australia time, and I want to stay awake for them. Thank you, Sanjeva, for that. Absolutely. Actually, Sanjeva and people that are that live in Australia or in a different time zone, let us know what would be a good time for us to work in a live to once a week to make it easier for you guys to follow along as well. So thank you, Sanjeva, for that. Let's see. Akli says, phase 3, denazification of West Ukraine, ?
Phase 3, phase 4, I don't know. One very interesting thing came out for me from one of Jacob Dreisen's latest videos, which is that he said that one of the reasons why the Russians aren't destroying some of the bridges across the Dnieper River is because they intend to use them. What do they intend to use them for? An advance into Western Ukraine? I don't know.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, there's been all this discussion about where will the Russians stop. Apparently, Olaf Scholz, on a plane on his way to Davos, apparently was saying the same thing. That Ukraine isn't going to win. The question is where is Putin going to stop? Well, interesting that Scholz says that. By the way, he says that on the plane, and then he comes along to Davos and he gives a speech and he says something entirely different. That Russia can't win, we won't let them win, and they won't be allowed to dictate terms. So he tells us privately what he's really thinking. And of course, he comes along in Davos and he gives a speech which he doesn't even believe himself.
What did we say in our video yesterday, Alexander, with regards to Mitsotakis in Greece? He gives his big speech in front of Congress and how Mitsotakis is taking on Putin, and we stand in solidarity with the Biden White House and against tyranny. And what were the articles yesterday that came out about Greece? Well, Greece is, helping transport all that Russian oil all over the world to India and China and to Europe. So, I mean, they say one thing, but the reality is completely different.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah. Let's see here. Simon says, good day from the loneliest country to be awake in. Great work, gents. Bedtime in Oz, unfortunately. Thank you, Simon, for that super chat. Beer and Fly says, always watch your videos from Greece. Makes me want to go there. Well, come visit.
Do come.
Do come.
Yeah. Greece is a wonderful place. It's a beautiful country. And goodness knows there's so much history and so many amazing things to see in Greece too. And, food is wonderful. I'm going to sound like I'm working for the Greek tourist agency, but please do come to Greece.
Yeah. Nick, thank you for that super sticker. RDDR says, where would Europe be in 1 year from now? Keep up the nice street walk talks.
That's an excellent question. And, you have to pass Kissinger's words very carefully because, and, I have to say, I mean, when I hear the word Kissinger, I usually reach for the vomit bag. I mean, I can't stand the man. I think he's a loathsome, sinister, terrible person because he's clever. I mean, nobody's disputed that about Kissinger, that he is clever. But, when he was talking about, Russia being essential for the European balance of power and that, things will change dramatically and disastrously if we don't settle this within the next 2 months. He's really giving a warning to Europe, it seems to me. He's basically telling the Europeans, you are on the road to your own self-destruction. And when we talk about Europe, of course, he must mean at some level the EU. So I think that Europe was in a very, very complicated position, to put it mildly. And when I hear things like, I was reading this morning in the Financial Times, a brief article that was briefly up on their headline story, and then somebody must have realized this is too absurd, and they took it down. When I read that Germany's reduced its imports of Russian gas to only 12% of the gas Germany uses, are you just kidding me? I mean, you really think I believe that kind of nonsense? In just a few weeks, you've reduced it from 40% to 12%.
Yeah.
With gas from where?
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah, just all lies. It's all lies.
Yeah, it's all lies.
Yeah. Summer of 1970. Thank you for that super sticker. Erica Lakin, thank you for that super chat. Lady Cosmica, thank you for moderating. Lady Cosmica, I guess you could say Bojo the clown deliberately folded on a royal flush and wasted the opportunity to do good for the entire country. I never really trusted Bojo, so never voted for him.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I entirely agree with that. I entirely with that. I always used to say about Bojo, and this is long before he became prime minister, that he's played the clown all his life to the point that he no longer knows how to be really serious. And that's been the trouble with him all along.
He's become the clown.
Yeah.
Jungle Jin says, has the Bank of England basically confiscated the world's gold it holds? What happens if other countries try to withdraw their gold from the Bank of England's vaults as a precaution against the theft of gold, as per Venezuela?
Absolutely. That was a good, the Venezuelan example is a very, very good one. And by the way, they're going to look particularly idiotic now if the Biden administration does a U-turn on sanctions against Venezuela. I mean, having seized that gold, on the pretext that it belongs to Guaido, and having got a court decision out of the High Court in London to confirm that, what do the British do? Do they give it back? I mean, it's just, it just goes to show the stupidity of the whole thing and the criminality of the whole thing. It's the sort of thing that Britain never did, but it has been doing recently because we're no longer led by serious people. So, of course, it's done enormous damage to the City of London, to the reputation of Britain as a major financial centre. And the fact also that Russian clients are now finding it impossible to get legal representation from London law firms has done a massive damage to Britain as an international law centre as well. And I don't think we're ever going to get back from this. I think the damage that's been done is so great that we will never recover the reputation we've thrown away.
Yeah. Alfaria says Albanese is like the Zelensky.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No.
That is not good. Thank you for that
No.
super chat. Hello World says, did you see the Washington Post article? It's over. They are admitting they have lost.
Yes. I wonder which Washington Post article. Do you mean the one about the Russian economy reverting to a command economy? Because I'm going to do a program about it over the weekend for locals, by the way. So just wait for that one. But I, to be honest, I stopped reading the Washington Post on a regular basis some time ago. It's just too ludicrous for me. If there's a particular article where they're admitting that there's been military defeat or something like that, well, please
Drop it in
signpost
the chat or send it to us.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I
absolutely.
still read the New York Times, the paper of record, because I mean, it's still it still contains a few glimmers of authority, if you like. But the Washington Post, I've just considered to be complete revel, frankly, 90% of the time.
I agree. Toilet Sauce says Rogozin published a list of space-related companies in Ukraine, saying Roscosmos was ready to help operate them. Said list included factories in Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk. No surprise here, as well as 2 companies in Kiev. Kiev is on the list. Very interesting.
I saw that. I absolutely saw that, Toilet Sauce. I had exactly the same thought as you. I think that is another clear sign of where all this is going.
You mean Kiev, maybe?
Kiev, absolutely. I mean, either they get a Ukrainian government that is going to realign Ukraine with Russia, so that we get all of these factories, all of these scientific establishments once more working alongside the Russian ones. Or if Ukraine just goes on fighting, well, sooner or later it'll be annexation. I mean, you could dress it up. You might get referendums. It may be supported. It may be popular. But I mean, when Rogozin comes up with something like this, I'm assuming that he's doing this, with the Kremlin's knowledge. Nobody has contradicted or said this is wrong. I mean, it's clearly a sign of what's coming.
Yeah. Andreas says Hungary is raising pensions per the 1st of July by 3.9%. That's very interesting. Thank you for that. Actually, that shows Hungary and Russia are the 2 countries, the 2 economies that are raising pensions. What does that tell you?
Absolutely. The dictators are looking after the living standards
those
of their
terrible
people,
dictators.
those terrible dictators, and the democracies are clobbering them. Power for the people and all that. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Andreas. Thank you very much. Habib, thank you for that super chat. Thank you very much. Raphael says Russia and China flying their planes over Japan without asking during that 4 countries get together is also a game changer. Yeah. We have a new world. Okay.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there have been Russian-Chinese joint air patrols and naval patrols. There were several of them happening over 2021. But of course, there was all that. Remember all that talk back in February, March about how China was dismayed by the war in Ukraine, by what the Russians had done, how there was a rift between Moscow and Beijing, how the Russian-Chinese strategic partnership was going to crack. Remember all those people, Blinken phoning the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, having all those chats with Wang Yi about all that. Well, we see the result: Chinese-Russian joint air patrols. It's closer and stronger than ever.
What a debacle all of this was for them. What a debacle. Anyway, Bohemian Gnostic says there isn't anyone in the U.S. government that has read Machiavelli or has even an idea how to negotiate. All they know is smash, burn, kill.
Absolutely correct. Can I just say something, of course, which is that Machiavelli, and reading his book, The Prince, it's by no means the immoral, cynical, wicked book that some people say. It's a practical handbook for how to conduct policies, and of course, it's of its time. It's written during the Renaissance, a time when things were done in somewhere sometimes rather differently from today. But I mean, one of the things he consistently warns against is what you might call an ideological outlook to your foreign policy. He says you've got to be realistic, you've got to be practical, you've got to think what your real options are, you've got to be prepared to negotiate, you've got to be, as he put it, sometimes a lion and sometimes a fox. You've got to sit down and talk, and sometimes when you have to, you've got to sit down, you've got to prepare to fight. But you can never exclude the one or the other. The United States doesn't understand how to conduct foreign policy. I mean, Blinken's speech about China, which is just a rehash of tired cliches, is another example. I mean, the Chinese are just ridiculing it.
Yeah. Where am I here? 1 second, Alexander. Danish says, who else is there in Ukraine that the Russians can negotiate with, as Zelensky is now unacceptable?
Yes. As I said, the generals.
Military.
I mean, there's a man called Zaluzhny or whatever his name is, who's the supreme commander. I don't want to say that because, of course, this is identified in that way. I mean, perhaps there'll be people in the SBU who'll be coming after him. But whatever. But there are military. The Russians have said that there are people in the military that they have a great deal of respect for. And if you go all the way back to, to the second day of the military operation, Putin actually said, he actually called on the army. People forget this. He actually said, why are you taking instructions or orders from these cokeheads? Didn't say quite what he meant, but why are you doing that?
He was right.
And he was right. Why don't you sit down and talk with us?
Yeah, he was right. Which once again goes to show that the Russians have better intelligence. They know what's going on. They know what's going on. The fact that that Putin mentioned that in his speech when they were about to launch a special military operation shows that they know exactly what is going on in Ukraine. Yeah.
Yes.
B. Kara says, Alexander, have you read P. Feyerabend's Against Method? And Alexander, what do you think of Karl Popper?
Right. First of all, I haven't read it. So, it's not another of those books that I haven't read. Now, Karl Popper, by the way, I have read, and I've read extensively about him. As an extremely clever man, in some ways a brilliant man, apparently an outstanding teacher. And, many of his contributions to philosophy and philosophical approaches. I'm not philosophically drawn. By the way, I'm not somebody who has a philosophical mind, but I know plenty of people who do, and they acknowledge his effectiveness. The one book of his which I didn't like at all, which I thought was both nasty and ridiculous, is the one that George Soros harps on about, which is the Open Society and its enemies, which I have to say I found at many levels a mean-minded and nasty book, going after the colossuses of the colossi of philosophy, people like Plato, Aristotle, you name it, and Hegel, and here we have Popper, who, whatever his abilities, I mean, he's not on the level of these people. I mean, coming out and writing it that way. And it struck me very much also as a book of its time, written during the Cold War, written basically as a defense of Western liberalism against the Soviet Union and what it stood for. So I think that this book is both unpleasant. I mean, I found it personally extremely unpleasant and also completely outdated. And the fact that George Soros and he's like have seized on it, Open Society Foundation and all of that, shows what a sinister effect it's had.
Yeah. Anything that George Soros is for, I'm against.
Yeah.
Another way to live your life. Hello World says Ukrainian volunteer fighters in the East feel abandoned. The Washington Post article, they are admitting it's over. That was a follow
I
up
see.
to the first.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Thank
that's
you, Hello
that's
World.
really helpful. And as you correctly say, if the Washington Post is writing that, then it is indeed over.
Valies, thank you for that super chat. Thank you for also moderating, Valies. And Sanjeva says, I remember workers doing their jobs diligently in the 90s, Russia, even when it wasn't certain that they would get paid. Is the West aware about how sophisticated Russian society is? Its society is disciplined more than the West thinks.
You are so correct. Now, I first went to Russia in 1998, just after the ruble collapsed. The real ruble collapsed and everything defaulted. And I was expecting when I went there, and remember, this is a really, really grim time. I was expecting when I went there to find that everything was at an absolute standstill. And I was stunned to see that public transport was working, that people were going about their jobs. They were going to their jobs. They were signing up for work. They were trying to work, even if they weren't being paid properly. They were still finding ways of getting by. And they had that sense of social commitment and obligation to just keep going. And that made me change my views about Russia radically. It was one of the things that made me change my views about Russia radically. I was hugely impressed, just as you are, by the social discipline and cohesion that I found there and the way it was absorbing all the damage that was done. The other thing I have to say was that having been somebody who had been brought up with, all the stories about Russia that go back all the way back to the 19th century, I was very, very surprised and impressed by the scale of the cities that I saw and their modernity. And that was even in the 90s.
Habib says, yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is something that people in the West simply don't understand.
All right. Habib says the special status given to Polish citizens may be a backdoor way with some legal special technical exemptions to allow for a way for troops into Ukraine.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But of course, the Russians have warned about it. Zaharova said Poland is in danger of mission creep, that it's acting in a way that will allow Polish troops into the back door, into Ukraine through the back door, allow Polish ministers to start assuming roles in the Polish government. Poland doesn't know what it's getting itself into, and it will turn out disastrously for them.
Yeah. Stephen says, why isn't this war over already? Ukraine has lost.
Well, good question. I mean, on any logical basis, Ukraine should be negotiating. They should have realized this weeks ago. Now, I say that they should have understood this all the way back to the time of the defeats in 2015 and when they signed the Minsk II agreement. They should have realized then that there was no way that the Russians were ever going to allow Donbass to be simply reoccupied by Ukraine. And Minsk II was actually a good deal for Ukraine. It would have held Ukraine together. It was in Ukraine's interests to implement it.
Yep, absolutely. It's like the gambler that goes to Vegas, Alexander, and they're playing poker or blackjack, and they're up like a couple $100, and they say that they could take that $100 and have a good weekend in Vegas, but they just stay there and they say, no, I want more, and they end up down $10,000.
Exactly.
They should have taken that Minsk deal. They should have taken it and have been happy with it.
Yeah,
it was a very good deal.
It's a very good deal for Ukraine.
Yeah. Colbury, thank you for that super sticker. Summer of 1970 says the special military operation in Ukraine is going exactly as planned. What about Odessa being liberated? Good job, guys.
I can't help but think that that's eventually going to happen. I mean, Putin brings up Odessa and the Odessa fire in the trade union building all the time. And I really can't believe that he's going to allow that loose end untied. So sooner or later, I don't know how it's going to be done, but in some form or other, you will get the Russians in Odessa.
Yeah. Everett says, Zelensky, quote, surrender to me, Putin, quote, bend over. Thank you for that, Everett. Mitt P says Hungarian government limits gas pumps to cars with national license plates to stop petrol tourism that threatens country's energy security. Yeah, I read about that. It's interesting. Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Jungle Jin says regarding Volyn call sign, Bandera's UPA and the SS Galicia division massacred 40 to 100,000 Poles in 1943, now called the Volyn massacre.
I know exactly, and you have a commander Volyn or Volina in Azov, and people in Poland are supposed not to notice. I'm sure a lot of them must do, actually. I mean, Poles that I know have long historic memories. I can't believe these people aren't are aware of what these things in that we've been seeing in Ukraine actually mean.
Yeah. Tanya says, XP to you both. Thank you, Tanya, for that. Gary, thank you for that super chat. Tom Thumb says, well done, chaps. Thanks for the efforts in trying to provide a truer perspective. Better spent on you guys than my TV license. Thank you very much for that, Gary. Let's see. Mitt P says, Poland and Ukraine are coming together, no borders, etc. How does it impact EU trade? There are major issues, North Ireland Protocol and Brexit. How Poland circles.
Yeah, well, indeed. How does it work out? As I said, I think Poland is working itself into a trap. We'll see how it gets out, or if it gets out. If the Poles and the Ukrainians are serious about this thing, then this will eventually work into a crisis in Poland, and then that will be another crisis for Europe. And we'll see what happens and what exactly they're thinking of.
Yeah. Smug Buddha says, please comment about the oil piracy from Syria to today's Greece incident. Is this a breakdown of laws of the sea?
Well, of course it is. Who in the West pays much heed of those any longer? There's been all those attacks on tankers by lots of sides, but including by our Western side. Tankers being seized in mid-seas in peacetime. So, of course, this is going on. But oil piracy in Syria is now, I think, becoming an increasingly open affair. The United States, through its proxies and some of its military, occupy Syrian oil wells. Turkey seems to be maneuvering to gain control of some of them. Lots of things like that going on now.
Ken Newmeister says, you mentioned earlier that Russia is respecting Ukraine's military. Could this be broader? There may be a parallel relationship with all parties, one between diplomats and another between the military. Is there a rift between diplomacy and military worldwide?
You know something? I don't think anybody in the Ukrainian diplomatic side is somebody that the Russians feel that they could talk to, because from what I can tell, the diplomats, the foreign ministry people are very, very much an ideological crowd who will follow will follow the Maidan line. So I don't think they have much faith in the diplomatic people. The military people, because they're soldiers whom they have to fight, and soldiers have a particular sense of realism. I think the Russians probably do respect. And by the way, my experience of soldiers is that they often make actually pretty good diplomats. They're thorough, they're careful, they prepare carefully, and they're realistic. They're not always the best diplomats, but they can sometimes be pretty good diplomats.
Steven says, let's go. Ura, Russia. Thank you, Steven, for that. Misanthropic and Out of Coffee says, just a heads up, reports of the Gates Foundation funding gain-of-function research of avian flu virus in Ukraine.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
Here we go again. Joe Public says, where are the Skripals? It's a great question.
I would love to know that. I to be honest, I think this is one of the most disturbing things. 2 people in Britain have been unpersoned. They vanished.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Skip Moyer says, is Russian news as bad as Western news? It's another great question.
That's a very, very good question. It's not as good as it was. You used to get these brilliant discussion programs, news discussion programs on Russian television, which were phenomenal. I think it's true to say that after the war started, people have been much more careful what they say, and you don't get this richness of debate that you used to see. Whether when the war is ended, we'll start to see more of that again, isn't we? We'll just have to wait and see. But I think it's deteriorated is the answer. I still don't think it's as bad as ours.
Yeah. Stephen says, let's go, Brandon. Thank you, Stephen, for that. And Stephen also says, Poland is on the list. Let's be clear. Thank you, Stephen, for that as well. And Joe Public says, where is Gwydon now? That's another good question, too.
It's a very good. I believe he's in Venezuela. Of course, the US. I believe. Oh, maybe not. I'm not sure where he is.
He's in the US, isn't he? Like
he's in the US. You're right. He's in the US. Yeah. But the fact is, the US still recognizes him formally. I don't think anybody takes him seriously anymore.
Yeah.
And by the way, if there's a change of government in Colombia, if this person Petro, whatever his name is, wins, and he reverses policy on recognizing Guaido, then I think even the fiction that this is still, a serious thing, I think even that will end.
Yeah. Stephen says, New World Order. Well, at least in Russia, we can trust Ura. Thank you, Stephen, for that. Raul says, do you think the treatment of Hungary by the bureaucrats in Brussels could lead to a breakdown of the EU and lead to a civil war?
It could lead to a crisis within the EU, because I personally take Orban's decisions to assume, emergency powers, war powers, as a sign that he's expecting a major attack from the EU bureaucracy over the next couple of weeks or months. So, it would lead to a crisis within the EU, given that there are so many other crises at the moment going on within the EU. It's difficult to know where that could go. But protests, we could easily see a protest wave. We have the prospects of a major rail strike now looming in Britain. We could see more of that elsewhere in Europe. We could see all kinds of things in France. Civil war, I devoutly hope not. I still think that's unlikely.
All right. Carmen GBL says Guaido is in the US, but he is irrelevant.
In the US.
And
Yeah.
Carmen also says Petro for president. Real Lot No Sense says increased Russian prosperity might lead to general dumbing down. People become complacent with higher levels of material comfort.
I think that's maybe true. I don't know. I gather that one of the things that the Russians are talking about, which I, by the way, completely support, and I remember I'm somebody who's familiar with education things, is that the Russians are pulling out of the Bologna system. And apparently they've been saying, we restructured our higher education system, which is the best in the world, to conform to this Bologna process, which meant that quality fell. So we're now going to go back to our old style of education system, which is so much better. So maybe that's a sign that they don't want to dumb down.
Yeah. Digar says, did you talk about Pakistan protests yet?
We have not, but can I just say that a person I know, in fact, he's somebody who's Pakistani, obviously, but who does building work. He's a highly educated, very conservative, very religious Pakistani. He's Muslim, but he also does building work for us. When we need a builder, he comes around. He does building work. He is absolutely furious about the Imran Khan thing. And there was a massive protest about it from the very large Pakistani community in London. And this person, who, as far as I was aware, was completely apolitical, he went and joined it. So, and was talking to us very angrily about the overthrow of Imran Khan. And, we were surprised because we didn't think he was a political person. And I get the sense that Pakistan is also moving towards a crisis. So unnecessary, by the way. I mean, I get it that there were people in Pakistan who were worried about Imran Khan and, maybe were afraid that, he would see through his anti-corruption things. But I think everybody who has studied that event accepts that it was the US involvement that ultimately tipped the scales against him. And what have they achieved? Imran Khan was no danger to the US. He didn't pose a real problem for the US, but a political crisis in Pakistan might do that. So what did they achieve by all of this? It was a completely foolish action, one that, this administration repeatedly takes.
Yeah. Alex Shulukov says, wow, it's amazing to see someone is seeing the truth and not US and Ukrainian lies. Thank you, Alex, for that super chat. Constanza says, UK appropriated gold that was property of the Polish Second Republic and government in exile. That was in London after the war until the 90s.
Yeah. And you can go back even further. There's always been this unresolved mystery about what happened to the Tsar's gold. The Tsar put an awful lot of his private property in the Bank of England before the First World War. And he was expecting, when he came after he was forced to abdicate, he thought he'd come to London as an exile and he'd be able to live off it. And apparently there was a lot of it there. And the British have never provided an explanation of what became of it. So the British have a record for this kind of thing. But I think this time they've gone further. I think that the way they behaved, and I'm not just talking about the Bank of England and seizing gold reserves, Venezuela's gold reserves and all that, but all this going after, the assets of people like Roman Abramovich, for example, has had a terrible effect. And if you know anything at all about the London housing market, I mean, it depends, especially at the high end, on foreign investors.
And what have they accomplished?
What have they accomplished?
What was the goal of doing that?
Well, I know. I don't know. I mean, I myself don't understand it. Given that all these, Russians who come to London and buy houses here are enemies of Putin. They're his opponents. They're not his friends.
God, so dumb. Steven says, all America understands is, I'm trying to make out that emoji, Steven. I think it's a gun. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, thank you for that, Stephen. Marcelo says, I would bet now that Russia will get everything from the Dnieper east and create a kind of natural border and divide Kiev in half. Just a thought for the headache.
I wouldn't be surprised. The only question is, will they stop at Kiev or will they move further west?
Elena Diaz says Guaido has declared himself president of Ukraine. In this crazy world, they just might try that.
They might indeed. We might have the two people swapping places. We might have Zelensky claiming to be president of Venezuela and Guaido in president of Ukraine. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. And believe it or not, there'd be some people, even if something crazy like that happened, you'd find some people trying to spin it. I mean, we do live in a clown world.
Yeah. Trading places. George D says the Australian elections were rigged. The results don't make sense when there was a protest of 1 million people in multiple states against major parties.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, I don't know enough to be able to comment on this, but I hear that and I hear it with concern.
Yeah. Tech Wong, thank you for that super chat. Mick Fax, thank you for that super sticker. Joe Public says, have you read Lee Childs?
No, I haven't.
Ryan says, morning from the U.S. fellas. Aside from Orban, among all European countries, who's the next bright up and coming leader? Is there anyone who can bring pragmatism and sensibility to Europe? This is absurd. I'll say a name that we're trying to actually get him on a live stream is Baudet. Thierry Baudet.
Yeah.
I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but he's one of the outliers, one of the maybe a rising star.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of people in Europe and in Britain who are on the fringes, are still the fringes of politics, who talk lots of sense, and you could see them doing real things. But of course, the establishment is still very much in control. Perhaps with this crisis, things will crack.
Yeah. Our R.NI, thank you for that super sticker. Stephen says Poland is target waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen, for that. Zakharova sent a pretty firm warning. Yeah. Valies says, off topic, Alexander, please tell us what it's like being a new father to twins.
It is being absolutely wonderful. Of course, it means you don't get any sleep, or not very much, because when one finishes, the other starts, and vice versa. But they are delightful. They are wonderful. They are charming. They're now eating solid food. They recognize lots of things. They talk in their own strange language. And of course, they love each other, which is remarkable. The thing about twins is that the stories that you hear, that twins have a particular bond, on the experience that I have with mine is true. They really do. And you can see that, when they are going to be able to be left able to play with each other, they will. They already want to. They're not quite able to yet, but they want to.
Yeah. Jeffrey, thank you for that super sticker. Yes, Thierry Baudet. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah. I think so. Thierry.
Yeah. Let's see here. Victor, thank you for that super chat. Ibrahim, thank you for that super sticker. Tree Climber says, so will Putin win the Nobel Peace Prize like Obama did?
I think if he won it, he'd send it back. I think it's the short answer. I think it brings bad luck, actually. That's my own personal view about it.
Jungle Jin says, Mauserwer's Hitler's empire, Nazi rule in occupied Europe, analyzes the reckless sidelining of the rule of law by the party and SS decrees. Sound familiar?
It's absolutely brilliant book, actually. I'd recommend it. Yeah.
Olu Odefin says, what did you think about the U.S. seizing Iranian oil ships yesterday?
I said already. I find it absolutely outrageous. I find it utterly wrong. Now, you may have all kinds of issues with Iran. I do, there's a lot about Iran which I do have serious issues with. But to my mind, seizing ships like this on the high seas is astonishing. We are heading, by the way, to a crisis with Iran. This is extraordinary. We have a crisis in Europe over Ukraine, which the neocons have engineered. We have Blinken now giving this speech about China, full of this extraordinary mixture of threats and warnings and things mixed up with all these assurances, which we now know don't really mean anything. They're drifting into a confrontation with China. And we're going to end up in a confrontation with Iran too. War with everyone.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. What's their goal? War with the entire world? Jungle Jin says, where is Medvechuk? Also, Slava Podkrain.
Yeah. Well, he's in prison. He's apparently giving evidence, or so we're told, against Poroshenko. I have to say again, I find the Medvechuk business horrifying, so scary, actually. Yeah. And again, you see, Medvechuk's arrested. He's shown displayed with handcuffs in a camouflage jacket in a deeply humiliating way. Igor Dodon in Moldova is arrested on ludicrous charges of treason. And what do the defenders of human rights in the West say? Well, they support it.
They invite him to the parliaments to speak.
Absolutely.
And to bring Nazis from Azov with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
Yeah. That's what they do. Andrei Volkov says, Ukraine will negotiate after all its commodities, example, wheat, are evacuated to Poland and Romania, and it is of no value to the West any longer, around August this year. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, it might be, but in practical terms, I doubt there's ever going to be a serious negotiation. To be straightforward about this, we've talked about the army stepping in and things. I don't think these things are going to happen, unfortunately, or in reality. I don't think there's ever going to be a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. And I think the way this is going to end is the Russians dictating terms.
P. Walker says political crises are needed to justify cushy Washington bureaucrats. Think of it as a white-collar think tank welfare jobs program.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. ASMI 06 says, how long do you think Zelensky et al. Will be able to get away with biting the feeding hand?
Yeah. Good question.
Very good question.
Very good question. I don't know.
Their rhetoric is getting more extreme by the
It is
day.
absolutely by the day, and more shrill, more extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen says it was a water pistol, but the same. Okay, thank you for that, Stephen. Paul, thank you for that super chat. Raphael says, I am going to be Alexander for once. When Russia wins this war against Ukraine, US, NATO, are we going to have a situation like when King Charles of France defeated the Vikings? Who's going to kiss the feet?
Who's going to kiss the feet? Goodness knows. I don't know. My goodness. We have extraordinary historical knowledge on locals, from our people on locals and elsewhere. I'm afraid that you've now come up with a historical event, which I don't know about. I don't know anything about King Charles and the Vikings and anybody kissing anybody's feet there. So this is one thing, and I was a trained historian, but this is a story I'm afraid I'm not familiar with. But who is going to kiss whose feet, or could kiss whose ring or hand or whatever it is? Who's going to surrender? Well, I'm not going to speculate too far. The one thing I get to say with confidence is it won't be Putin.
Yeah. A troubled mind says, after World War II, military veterans had jobs and prosperity waiting for them. Russian military after Ukraine won't suffer the same fate as the U.S. vets after Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Any job prospects for Russian vets versus U.S. vets, given the difference in quality in education and military education training?
I agree with that, actually. I think, for one thing, I think the Russians have a history of looking after their veterans, except in the 90s.
Yeah. Where are we here? 1 second, Alexander. Steven says, I think Alexander would make a great PM, Prime Minister.
Oh,
what do you say,
not
Alexander? Are you
not happening? Not happening. I'm afraid any thought of involving myself in politics died decades ago.
Marcelo says, after the river, most likely Odessa, and I would not be surprised if Moldova calls a referendum to join Russia further west. I think would be a headache.
No, I'm not going to try and. I'm not going to draw the lines where Putin is going to stop. I don't know where he's going to stop. I don't know what Russian thinking is, what discussions they're having about this in the Kremlin. They don't talk to me, so I don't know. I always used to say I didn't think they would go to Western Ukraine. I'm less sure now, actually.
Yeah, I agree. We just don't know. Mani says, blessings to your darling twins, Alexander.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Talentless Hipster says, don't billionaires in China and billionaires in the U.S. have everything in common?
They have lots in common. For one thing, being a billionaire in any country makes you a part of a global elite class where you share lots of things in common. But I do get the sense that in China, the government still retains control. Criticize China however much you want. Talk about the CCP, speak a bit as critically as you like. But I do get the sense that it is ultimately in control. In the US, I'm afraid I don't think that's the case. I think there, the billionaires, the oligarch class controls the government. Yeah.
Medulla says the West might be going for broke, led by the WEF, World Economic Forum.
Yeah, I think they might very well be, and that's a frightening thought, actually. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, G-Dog says there is talk of the Laughing Stock Peace Prize going to Zelensky. Yeah, I've heard that.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm sure he'll get it. Actually,
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
They did win Eurovision. Jungle Jin says, what is happening to Russia's accumulating euro-dollar income from the export of non-gas, non-ruble commodities?
Well, this is a problem because they're getting so much foreign exchange. What do they do with it? Do they keep it locked up in bank accounts in Moscow where it can't get interest? And remember, it depreciates because of the inflation in the West. Or do they convert it all into rubles, in which case the ruble strengthens too much? So they've got, they have, if you like, an abundance of riches at the moment. I know they're buying gold again, and I suspect they'll be doing more of that.
Yeah. Pathetic Albion says, how keen do you think Erdogan will be about joining Boris's new alliance plan?
No, he won't be. He won't be keen at all.
Yeah.
He's got entirely different perspectives. I mean, this thing that Boris has come up with is just
It's
nonsense.
laughable. It's nonsense.
It's laughable. Yeah.
So they went through Brexit so they can create another EU.
Exactly.
Laughable. Degar says, any chance you guys will come to the USA and have live events?
Yeah, there is. Absolutely. I mean, eventually, it's absolutely possible.
Let's see here. Real Lot No Sense says, sigh again. Moldova is Romanian. Of course, the people there could choose their path, history as it was, but from that to freely choosing an opposite direction than their brothers in Romania is quite a stretch.
Possibly. I mean, look, I'm not an expert on Moldova. I actually know someone from there very well, by the way, but I don't pretend to be an expert. I take your point completely, and I understand what you're saying.
Let's see. ASMI 06 says, you guys should invite Zakharova to your program. She seems to know her way with words. I feel like that would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Would she come on? That would be great.
Would she come on? Well, indeed. Would YouTube let us show a program with her on is another question. Given the moment they're talking about, banning the Russian foreign ministry's, press conferences from YouTube.
That's
so,
ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. Yeah. Steven says, but Alexander, but you are honest, Alexander, and see with things without emotions. You would do a great job as Prime Minister.
Yeah. The thing to understand about politics at the moment, the way it's structured in the West, is that if you see things too clearly, I'm not saying I do, but if you see things too clearly, you don't make yourself very popular. Not with the political class. It's not seen as an advantage.
Yeah. Kurt says the Duran show where you discuss that Putin might be a bit naive in his trust of the West. I believe that Putin also knows that the trend of the support to Ukraine is going in Russia's direction. Do you agree?
I think so, but I think that Putin has been on a massive education about the West. I think when he became president of Russia, he thought that Russia's future lay in partnership with the West. He forged all those links with people like Schroeder and Chirac and Berlusconi. If you go back to that time, the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, I think in those days he could not have imagined a future for Russia that was not part of the West, or at least not connected to the West. And then I think gradually he began to realize that it's simply not going to happen in any way that would be beneficial to Russia. And I think he's completely changed his views. So I think he's somebody who's steadily and incrementally changed his understanding of the West.
Ronald B says, could the globalists be pushing towards a 1984 world where there are three mega states always at war with each other, never a real victory or defeat, absolute internal control by the inner party?
I don't think this is what they wanted initially. I think they wanted a globalist world with themselves in control and the inner party running the entire globe. I'm afraid, and I think it's a real danger, that we could end up with an outcome not very different from the one you said, or even identical to the thing you said, Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia. I don't personally think that is where we're going. But, the danger does certainly exist.
Deng Fang Shu says, clown world is when you take wife swaps one step further and president swaps, swapping Zelensky with Guaido. Yeah. Thank you for that. Juha says, it's a done deal behind the scenes. No Ukraine after this.
I think you could be very well right. I'll be. By the way, I should say I personally would be sorry. I mean, you know, when Ukraine became independent, I'll just say this: I wish it well. I mean, I not really given much thought before to the possibility of an independent Ukraine. Most people I knew in the West hadn't done so. But I said to myself, well, this country has an identity, clearly. It has it's big, it's got lots of its people, it's got rich in natural resources, it should do well, and I wish it well. And it's really tragic what has happened there.
A Ukraine federation. That's what they had on the table with Minsk. That's what they should have gone with.
Absolutely.
And that would have been a system that would have worked.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Mike Watts says, do you think that the sudden pullback in Afghanistan was actually the U.S. preparing for an escalation in Ukraine?
Yes, I do. I mean, we talked about this in a program which we did on Russiagate. You can find it on our Duran channel. That's exactly what I think.
Yeah. Stephen says, good point, Alexander, with regards to being the Prime Minister of the UK, living in 10 Downing Street.
Very, very uncomfortable flat, apparently. So I'm told. Apparently, the building itself is magnificent. It's, by the way, very misleading when you see the pictures. It looks quite small. In fact, if you go inside 10 Downing Street, it is enormous. It's much bigger than it looks from its entrance, and that's very, very typical of London houses of that period.
Raphael says, Rollo Flanders, the Vikings chief, was asked to kiss the feet of King Charles as a sign of submission after they were defeated in 846 930. Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Fantastic, Raphael.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Victor says, what's the story with the Belgrade statue at the end of your videos?
Alex?
I was in Belgrade. That reminds me, Alexander, you know, I think I've told you this in the past, but now I'm going to say it on a live. Can you get some video of London, of some sites that you want, so I can put that as the outro for your videos?
Not? Absolutely.
By the way,
absolutely. Yeah, of course.
I've told you this before in the past, but I'm going to remind you again in front of 8,500 people, 9,000 people. Yeah, just get like 20 seconds of like a nice whatever you want, a park,
absolutely,
Big Ben. It doesn't matter.
Big Ben.
So I could put that as your outro.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll do. Definitely.
Thank you. Let's see here. John Flanders says, any comment on the summit of the Americas? Biden has a real problem.
Yeah. I haven't followed this, but I'm sure he does have a problem. I mean, summit of the Americas, I don't think that Biden's mind really works on what's going on very much in Latin America. And the ground in Latin America is shifting. I mean, we see left-wing parties winning, probably in Colombia, possibly in Brazil, and distancing themselves increasingly from a neocon administration.
Yeah. Jungle Jim says Russia knew the degree Ukraine had been NATOized and Nazified when it made its December 2021 demands for revised European security architecture. The situation and the demands seem to have been incompatible.
Yes. Can I just say, I remember reading multiple Russian comments before the war for about a year, complaining about Western arms deliveries to Ukraine, saying that Ukraine had been stuffed with weapons. And I didn't take them fully seriously. And I think now I've come to realize that what the Russians were saying was absolutely right. So I think that the Russians knew exactly what they were doing about Ukraine. They knew exactly what the situation was. And I think it was one of the factors that made them realize sometime last year that war in Ukraine was coming.
Yeah. It's Heidegger says, what do you think of Russia allowing Syria to shoot at Israeli planes with more advanced weaponry? I'm excited, he says.
Well, I mean, it is exciting. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Israelis have responded, by the way, with an olive branch to Russia. They've stopped US missile systems being sent to Ukraine, which use Israeli components. So it may be that there's some kind of haggling going on between the Russians and the Israelis. There often is. The Russians and the Israelis have a complex relationship with each other, but certainly the Russians have been increasingly making it clear that they're unhappy by these Israeli strikes on Syria, and gradually, ever so slowly, they've been turning up the dial towards giving the Syrians a green light to use all those weapons, the S-300s and all the rest against Israeli planes.
Yeah, Euro Gabor says, how pathetic is it when Zelensky and Michelle sending a woman to energy blackmail or a bond? No balls, no spine. Nonetheless, useful idiots of their puppeteers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy, her statements.
Yeah.
They're not winning France. Zelensky regime. They're not winning France. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, somebody talked about the question about the summit of the Americas. I mean, what about the ASEAN summit? Biden and all these people, Southeast Asia, getting them all to condemn Russia, except they all refuse to do it, trying to rally them against Beijing, except they don't really want to be rallied against Beijing. The fact is, this isn't a popular administration. People don't like it.
Exactly. Elaine says, with each day that passes, Zelensky looks more and more like a clown and his audience more childish.
I agree. And I think that's a feeling that's starting to take hold. I think you're starting to see people in the West who are starting to say to themselves, I mean, the general public, certainly in Britain, I mean, they originally fell for this thing about Zelensky, the great war leader, the hero, all of this. I think they're starting to see behind the image, and they're beginning to realize that this man really isn't serious and isn't any real sort of leader, and that the kind of things that they've been hearing about Ukraine just aren't real either.
Yeah. Talentless Hipster says, how do you say politely, no, you can't borrow a book?
How do you say it politely? Please don't borrow a book, I suppose. But seriously, I mean, I don't know.
I'm reading that book now. I'm reading it right now.
I'm reading it right now, yeah.
Let's see. Joe Public says the Les Child's question was satirical, as he's a fiction writer.
I see. Okay.
Thank you, Joe Public, for that. And ASMI06 says, Alexander, how about a little video tour for us like Alex does? Maybe also show prices in stores. Here in Canada, prices flew into spaces for some products.
A very, very good point. And empty shelves in London supermarkets, of which we're beginning to see increasing signs of. Speaking of which, by the way, Fred Weir, who is a correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor in Moscow, and one of the few really good journalists in Russia, in my opinion. It doesn't mean I always agree with him, but anyway, he was showing photos of supermarkets in Moscow with shelves bulging with fresh food and produce, and it was fascinating to read the comments on the threads, and him showing all of this was making some people extremely angry. But, I could certainly do that in London, and why not? That might be a good idea.
Yeah, Carmen says we should show the empty shelves. Ronald B says, I support Israel and the U.S. I support any actions to protect their borders and oppose imperialist adventures to destabilize their neighbors and clients.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ronald, for that. And Mehdi says, at the Duran, will the West learn from the events in Ukraine? Russia proved there is a completely different alternative to Western military philosophy, and it is proving highly effective against our own.
I would have thought there would be lots of people in the Pentagon who are looking at this campaign and who are thinking and trying to learn lessons from it. The problem is that political decisions makers in the West never learn these lessons, and they always select for commanders, for generals, the kind of people that tell them what they want to hear. So I think you get a layer of professionals in the Pentagon who understand all of this, but above them, they just don't really, it doesn't really seem to come together, and they don't really get it in the end. And I think you'll be seeing much more of that's the problem. So you get things go wrong and the same mistakes are repeated, and they see somewhere else where things go right, but they won't learn the lessons from it.
Yeah. Degar says it would be a great idea, Alexander. Imagine to film
Yeah.
prices and film around London. I agree.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Pathetic Albion says, have the West really soberly considered the consequences of a war with China? It is imminent.
No, they have not considered it. There's barely been any discussion about it. I mean, in Britain, we're not talking about war with China. We're talking about Partygate. In the United States, they're talking about the Amber Heard case. I mean, we are not focused on the real dangers because our media, what passes for mainstream media, sucks.
Miss Texas G says, I don't think Zelensky will capitulate. I think he will be forcefully removed by his own people.
I'm afraid I agree.
By the military, I think it's a
real possibility.
Real possibility, absolutely. Danish says, I wonder what happens in the collective West after Zelensky capitulates and their economies are in ruins.
Good question. I don't know. A major political crisis, one would like to think. More probably, the political class will close ranks and will increase its surveillance and controls. That's what they always do.
Yeah. A troubled mind says, with the curtain being pulled back on the empire of lies, how can the West recover now that the entire world knows they can't be trusted and that its primary export of democracy can't compete with Russian food and energy exports?
They don't understand it. That's the trouble. I mean, watch Blinken's speech about China. I mean, the lack of self-awareness in it was what really stood out for me. I mean, he was talking. I mean, there was a section. I mean, there was a bizarre section where he was saying, we're not here to dictate to people in the Pacific. We're here to, so that they can choose which alliances and friends they want. This is, a few weeks after we saw all that furious reaction when the Solomon Islands made that agreement with China. So, I mean, there is a complete lack of self-awareness and self-knowledge. And I don't think they are capable of understanding how they're seen by others.
Boz407, thank you for that super chat. Stephen Bateman says, can you please answer Mimo Cieno? Not sure I understand.
No, I don't understand.
Let me know, Stephen, in the chat what you mean by that.
Yeah.
And we'll try to answer it. SWJ Morris says, what do you make of Henry Kissinger pleading for a return to negotiations? Is there a split in the globalist view on Ukraine?
Well, the manifestly is, and we're getting more signs of that with every hour. I mean, there's more and more people talking openly about this. As I said, I mean, I can't stand Kissinger. I mean, I remember him when he was Secretary of State and then before the National Security Advisor and all that. So, in the Nixon years, and the Nixon and Ford period. So, I mean, I remember him well. I always found him a deeply, extremely dangerous, very sinister figure. And, I don't like him, but he's clever. He is really clever. And what he's saying is clever. It's right. It's sensible. It's wise, if you like. But there are a lot of other people who just won't hear it.
And it may be too late.
And it may
he should have said this 3 months ago.
He should have 3 months ago, exactly.
8 years ago, actually.
8 years ago, yeah.
The collective says Israel may no longer be the darling of the U.S.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that there is an erosion of support for Israel in the U.S. Certainly there is within the Democratic Party. That's my own sense.
Jungle Jin says, chat comments at Moats, symptoms of monkeypox, insatiable desire for bananas, throwing your poo at people and watching the BBC and CNN. Thank you for that.
Well, I didn't realize it had spread so far.
Yeah. ASMI says, yesterday there was a statement from the U.S. saying that they are not giving weapons to Ukraine as it will be an escalation. Sounds like now they are listening to Russians about their red lines. And then they said they're going to send MLRS as well. So
well, no, don't take what they say very seriously. I was going to say,
all mixed messages. Yeah. Joe Public says, if Alexander had his hands tied, would he still be able to speak?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I'll tell you something. I mean, one of the things when you talk in court in London, And believe it or not, despite my being a person who waves my hands around a lot, when you talk and when you have to address a judge in England, you're supposed to keep your left hand absolutely still and only use your right, and do it very, very gently from time to time as you look at the judge. And believe it or not, I did it. I trained myself to do it.
A troubled mind says the lack of insight about the ramifications of their lives makes any near future peace or trade with the global South impossible.
I completely agree. I absolutely agree. And I speak to people from the global South, including business people, and they tell me that very thing.
Pathetic Albion says, any thoughts on China's new drone carriers?
No, I'm not going to talk about these technical things. I'm going to just say this. I think when it comes to drones, we've learned, there's a really good piece by Larry Johnson about the importance of drones in Ukraine. So drones, very effective as surveillance weapons, very for surveillance. Tactical drones, he's more skeptical. He seems more skeptical about what these drone carriers that the Chinese are coming up are going to do. I'm not even going to start there. I mean, it's the kind of thing I'm really not expert on.
Thank you, and for that super chat. G Dog says, is the lack of speeches from Putin and other Russian leaders on mainstream a fear of Americans suddenly realizing who the real thugs are?
I don't know.
I'll say this: the more when people actually do hear Putin speak instead of going off of what MSNBC or CNN say he said, people actually say, Putin makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
I mean, when they actually hear him. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's true. I should say something. I mean, which is why, by the way, when he tries to give interviews with Western media, they're so aggressive and they basically don't let him speak. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, actually, which is why I really ask myself why people bother, why he bothers to give these interviews. But if you actually listen to Putin, he's very systematic, very logical. His comments are always very structured. They're always extremely measured. And I've seen him in person twice. I've never spoken to him. I've never come really close to him. There were thousands of people else are in the room at the same time as me, but I've seen him twice in the flesh. And the thing that really, really came across to me is that he is a very polite man. You can tell he's very courteous. He's the sort of person, who opens doors for other people, who moves chairs, and it's not an act. It's just something that is very natural to him.
Jungle Jin says the minister for bullying the Solomon Islands lost his seat in the Australian federal elections.
Well, there you go. Sounds promising.
Sparky says Russia should take all of Ukraine instead of just the good parts, just to spite the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, well, quite, yes. I don't know how they're going to respond to a debacle in Ukraine. They didn't expect it, and I don't know that they have a plan for it. Both at the WEF, where I'm hearing, by the way, that the mood was apocalyptic. I read that. I think it was Larry Elliott in The Guardian, but I might have got that wrong. But anyway, I was reading that the mood in the WEF is apocalyptic. And I think generally across the collective West, there really is no plan B. Well, plan A was obliterate the Russian economy. I mean, the French finance minister said we're going to destroy the Russian economy. That didn't work. Plan B, bog Russia down in a prolonged war. That's not working either. I don't think they have a plan C.
Yeah. They're just going to memory hold it.
Yeah.
Was there any fallout out of Afghanistan, like real fallout for Biden?
No.
Or any of the people involved in that?
Well, of course there wasn't. But of course, Ukraine is on a different level to Afghanistan.
Yeah,
However, emotional Americans are about Afghanistan and 9/11 and all that. It's a long time. 9/11 anyway was a long time ago now. Ukraine is in Europe. It would be different. I think. But still, I don't doubt their ability to memory hold things.
Yeah. Jennifer Chang, thank you very, very much for that super chat. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you, Jennifer, as well. Thank you for that. Lana, thank you for that super sticker. Kumar says George Soros wants Gazprom privatized to the West. I'm sure he does.
Yes, of course. He does. No, he does. Absolutely. He's talked about this in the past. He absolutely does. I mean, part of what he wanted, part of what many people in the West wanted, part of what the European Commission wanted, is that they wanted to extend the EU's third energy package into Russia. That would have eventually required the privatization of the big Russian energy companies, the state energy companies, Rosneft and Gazprom, and they're breaking up. Diversification, as it was always said, in the upstream. So you have diversification downstream in the gas market in Europe and diversification upstream in Russia itself. And of course, Putin came along and he said, "What do you take us for, idiots?"
Yeah. Have you seen the prank with George Bush? Yes, I've seen that.
Yes,
prank.
of course we have.
That
Yeah,
was hilarious.
Yeah.
Kurt Fram says the most scary thing about Kissinger is that he is 98 and still looks like he did 40 years ago.
Yeah, no, true enough. True, absolutely, very true.
Stephen says that is why I like this man. I imagine, Stephen, you're talking about Putin. I imagine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Lady Cosmica says, speaking of monkeypox, it seems that the NHS have been doing a little editing on their site about the disease, making it seem like it is worse than it really is.
I've heard the same.
Yeah. And RS says, given the current state of things, should Americans immigrate to Russia? I'm an Orthodox Christian in the U.S. Very difficult to immigrate to Russia.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very difficult.
Very difficult, yeah.
It's not easy to get the paperwork and all that stuff.
No.
David says, if hardliners successfully attempt to remove Mr. Putin, who are likely candidates to replace Putin?
I don't know. But
I'm liking Medvedev.
Yeah,
I have to be honest. Yeah. Is it a true Alexander? I mean, he
absolutely.
really has upped his game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Massively so. And become popular for the first time, probably. It's surprising to see. Mind you, I'm going to say this. I've always said all along that this idea of Medvedev as this liberal was, people weren't really following him closely. But anyway, put that aside. There isn't going to be a coup against Putin. That doesn't mean that there aren't lots of people much more hardline than he is. When he does leave the scene, which one day he will, don't expect a liberal to take his place. That's, the person who's going to take over may be a lot more hardline than he is.
Yeah. Sparky says, seems like Brazil may be on Russia's side, whether Bolsonaro or Lula end up in charge. I agree.
Absolutely. Agree with that too.
Good comment, Sparky.
Yeah.
Life of Brian says, I miss the good old days when the BBC was content just to sit on the ClimateGate emails and cover up for Jimmy Savile. Wow. That is a very smart comment there from Life of Brian. Raul Pinto says, I'm so addicted to the Duran that I now get all my news from the Duran community only.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you
for that. And Jinsha says, from the regions Zotomir and Vinnytsia could be the Russian buffer zone, leaving the West to the nationalists and the land grabs. Russia then has most of the resources and controls the pipelines.
Absolutely, yeah. That could very well be the Russian game plan. I'm going to say this: if you'd asked me this question a month ago, if you made that point a month ago, I would have probably agreed with you. And I still think on balance, you're probably right. But I'm beginning to wonder, and the reason is with all this meddling by Poland in Western Ukraine, I wonder whether the Russians feel that it's really safe to leave Western Ukraine alone. Yeah. But, we'll see.
Medi1 says, why does the WEF have its own 5,000-man security force in Davos? What gives them any authority whatsoever to have it?
Well, because, the WEF is actually Spectre and Klaus Schwab is really Blofeld and he's got to have his private army. So that's the answer.
Yep. Let's see here. We'll wrap it up, Alexander. We'll get the final questions. There's a dog right outside my apartment here. That's very upset. Very upset, dog. The Afghans from Joe Public says the Afghans could sell American weapons to Ukraine.
Of course they can. I mean, many of the weapons Ukraine has been getting are actually weapons that were intended for the Afghan army. One of the most bizarre things I read, one of the very bizarre things I read, was in the Daily Telegraph some weeks ago about how Ukraine is going to suddenly get all these advanced Western weapons, and they're not going to have the old Soviet helicopters anymore. They're going to get really new, modern, ultra modern Mi-17 American helicopters. Nobody told them that the Mi-17 is actually a Russian helicopter based on the Mi-8.
ASMI 06 says, actually, quite a few foreigners moved to Russia in the last few years, like entire families from Australia. They have YouTube channels and seem happy. I agree, but I think the Australia one in that case had to do with the farmlands, if I'm not mistaken. Though.
Yes.
There are carve-outs that the Russian government has for certain work.
Absolutely. If you want to set up as a farmer, they have a program to get, because they really want to develop. They got vast amounts of lands that are unused and that they want to bring basically into production. So they have a policy of trying to attract people who are interested and good at farming.
Elaine, thank you for that super sticker. Evans, thank you for that super sticker. Let's see. Marcelo says Brazil is BRICS by Lula and Bolsonaro went neutral.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I agree. By the way, I mean, I think Bolsonaro as well, with Bolsonaro, I mean, he was, I think, skeptical about the BRICS and very pro-American when Donald Trump was president. But he's looked at Biden and he said, I don't like this.
Let's see here. Just a couple more, Alexander. Medi says, thanks, Duran, for this. You guys are always my first stop for the truth. Thank you for that, Medi. And let's see. Divine Insurgent says, which Balkan country do you like the most?
Oh, I like all of them. I, as a Greek, I always have an instinctive and very strong sympathy for Serbia. I have to say this. And Belgrade is a wonderful city. I haven't been there for a long time, but I really, really do like Belgrade. Now, I've never been to, there's some Balkan countries I've never been to. I don't know whether Romanians think of themselves as Balkans, but I've never been to Romania. Bulgaria, I have been to, and I've liked.
Thank you for that, Divine Insurgent. And let's see here. George Schaefer says, your thoughts on school shootings in the States and the impact on the Second Amendment?
Yeah, I don't like, I don't want to get too involved in this topic, which is a tragic and very upsetting one, actually. I'm only going to say this. I thought that Biden's comments, again, were hopelessly inappropriate at a time when the whole point surely was to try and bring Americans together after these terrible tragedies. What he's doing, again, is he's taking a partisan line, which is going to drive them further apart. And I think he doesn't understand what his true job is.
He doesn't understand much of anything. Yeah.
No.
Or maybe the script
Or maybe
writers.
he wants it.
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. And we got one more here from Tish M. I, Earl Grey, mentions the Duran and takes us on walks in Moscow. Also, when will you be on with Jackson Hinkle? Yeah, Alexander?
No, you carry on, Alex.
No, I, Earl Grey. Yeah, great channel. Definitely recommend his channel. Fantastic channel. I like him a lot. Very cool guy. And Jackson Hinkle, great channel. I like him a lot. Very cool guy. And I've actually we've exchanged emails, but I sent Jackson Hinkle. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I sent him an email and I said, let's do a live stream, but he didn't get back to me. But when you get a lot of emails going back and forth, you lose track. I lose track as well. So it's tough, setting up collaborations. It's hard. It's hard. It's a lot of work. Yeah,
it's an awful lot of work. It's very time consuming because, of course, people have their own schedules, their own ideas, and trying to get everything together doesn't always happen very fast.
Yeah, but I like both of those guys,
Yeah.
Alexander. I think
Yeah,
they're
I
really
do.
good guys, and they're
Yeah, I
really
agree.
honest guys, and they
I
have
agree.
really good channels, and they work really hard. And I think we should support them.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah.
absolutely. George, no, I got you, George. We'll do the final ones here, Alexander. ThinkPad
Yeah.
says, apologies if asked. Predictions for Pakistan. We got to do a show on.
We got to do
Pakistan.
a show for Pakistan. Yeah.
Yeah. Prediction, real quick. Any
Prediction: political crisis, perhaps a political breakthrough. Perhaps Pakistan might change in a way that is for the good. I was really astonished, as I said, that this person I know in London, who just has done work for me, is suddenly politically, excited, and he's not somebody who's been that way about his own country. So it might actually be that some good comes out of this.
Yeah. Let's see. Marisa L, thank you for that super chat. JC Adder, thank you for that super chat. And Summer of 1970 says there is more stupidity than hydrogen in the universe, and it has longer shelf life. Frank Zappa. Great Frank Zappa. Thank you. That's a good super chat to end the show with. Yeah, the great Frank Zappa quote. Great super chat there. All right, Alexander, we covered quite a lot of ground.
We certainly did.
Thank you as well to Gonzalo Lira for just finding a spot to jump on, finding internet to jump on and talk to us. Toilet Sauce has a super chat here, Alexander, which says, does the West realize what they have created with the Zelensky cult of personality? Their puppet is telling them to F off. Are they losing control? Yes,
they are losing control. They are beginning to sense it. They don't know what to do. That's my answer.
Yeah. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you, Valies. Thank you, Lady Cosmica. Thank you to GEC812. Thank you to Reckless Abandon. I think I saw Zarael in the house as well, the great Zarael. And was Alan Watson in here? I'm not sure. I think I saw Alan Watson, or maybe. Maybe I'm always seeing Alan Watson in the chat. Yeah. If Alan, if you were moderating, thank you as well. And who else? Did I miss anybody? I don't think I missed any of the moderators here. I think I got them all. Great. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the questions on Locals, on Rumble, on Odyssey, the super chats on YouTube, the questions on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who watched us. Once again, thank you to Mr. Gonzalo Lira in Kharkov, sitting in a supermarket using the Wi-Fi in Kharkov. Gonzalo, thank you very much for that. Alexander, final words to close it out.
I mean, I've just caught up with this Washington Post article, and by the way, it's the lead story on Zero Hedge as well. And clearly, this is the moment. This is the tipping point, I'd say, at least in the West's perception. If the Washington Post is coming up with these stories about Ukraine losing, then frankly, it is over.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Over for them.
It may be over for them too. Yeah, like it's also
the neoliberal crowd.
Exactly. I mean, it's a crisis for the Biden administration.
The cool kids in DC. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we will leave it there, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great Friday. Let me just do one final check. Alexander, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And what video are you going to be putting up?
Well, I'm going to do an update for this channel about the situation in Ukraine, but I'm also planning to do another video over the weekend. I'm not sure how quickly it'll be up.
On Locals, you said.
On Locals, but which will be on specifically addressing this Washington Post article about how Russia's economy is reverting to a command economy and how they're going to build Moskvich cars again from the 1980s or 70s or 50s, and how all their airplanes are going to start falling out of the sky when they run out of spare parts. So I'm going to be doing a piece on that.
One final comment from you, Alexander, then we're definitely signing off.
Yeah.
Remember when we first started to work together and you told me that the Russian economy was like a big wheel? Because I mentioned that in a video I did this morning. Can you repeat that once again? And that'll be our closing. Because I remember you told that story. You said, Alex, the Russian economy is like a big, massive wheel. And this was like 4 years ago.
Absolutely. And, it moves, you think it's moving very slowly. But it's moving because it's so big, you underestimate its speed. And of course, if you know anything about this, it is generating a huge amount of power at the same time. And eventually, as it continues to pick up speed and pick up pace, it will change everything around it. It will completely alter the entire economic geography of Western Eurasia, of Europe, of Iran, of everything. And we're starting to see it now increasingly picking up speed.
That was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.